Mr. Gonzalez, who is here today, he knew how to convince Milosevic to release the 3 POWs. In my tradition, the Talmud discusses being a prisoner is the hardest of all suffering, and teaches that a synagogue may even sell a Torah scroll to fulfill the commandment of redeeming the captives. And now, promise I made to Reverend Jackson 2 decades ago that I can now fulfill. We were sitting alone and he said, "When I die, tell them the truth." We were discussing the fallout from his conversation regarding growing up in Greenville, South Carolina.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Live Impact News here on March 6th. It is 1:01 p.m. and it is a Friday. Thank you so much for joining us on the last day of this first week of March. We have a beautiful weekend ahead, but first we have 2 straight hours of live streaming news right here on Live Impact News. And we certainly cannot start any show, but especially a Friday show, without saying hello to the People's producer, Nia Campbell. Nia, welcome to Friday. You're getting a round of applause from Hunter.
I appreciate it, Hunter. Thank you.
You're so welcome, Nia.
I love the fact that it's Friday, and I'm excited to partake in.
What's going on this weekend? What are you up to?
I'm planning on reading outside, go walk on the boardwalk. I'm also going to get some serious adult things handled as well.
Now, which boardwalk is boardwalk for you?
Beach.
Okay, you're headed to the
There's
ocean
multiple?
front. Well, I suppose that like Town Point Park sort of has a walk. I don't know, Buckrow Beach, I don't know if you call that a boardwalk, but you can certainly walk along the beach, I believe. Hunter, help me out.
I am going to have to disagree.
Okay, Hunter. Well, you know by now that Hunter Forst is meteorologist extraordinaire, also a fan of Fridays, not a fan of boardwalks. Hunter, what's going on?
I do love boardwalks.
You do like boardwalks?
I do love boardwalks.
I
just don't think Town Point Park, like the sidewalk along the water, is a boardwalk.
I think you're probably right, ultimately. Maybe we'll have to get a little bit, we'll have to dig into the definition of boardwalk. Some of Town Point Park is that sort of wooden deck material, right? Along the water. I've been out there for all the fests, but I can't remember specifically.
Like where the docks are?
Yeah. Okay. All right. You know what? Fair enough. Yeah. I feel as though I've been disproven early on this Friday. Usually I make it at least an hour into the stream. But we're here. And Hunter, he's done his job for the day. But that's not true, Hunter. You have another job to do for us, and it is to tell us what is going on with this forecast. A rollicking, gorgeous couple of days, Hampton Roads, and it'll continue?
So today is a tale of 2 forecasts.
Okay, very nice. Spin the narrative for
us. It's really warm in some spots and chilly in some spots.
Interesting. Now, is this an inland versus type of situation? Is
pretty much.
North, south, east,
west?
It's
north, south, and coast.
Let's start with the warm spots. Where is it kind of warm today? Where in the area is it staying with that vibe from Wednesday and Thursday?
So, if you're like further inland, you're in Chesapeake, you're in Suffolk, you're down into eastern North Carolina. It's warm outside right now. But temperatures will continue to drop through the afternoon for most of us.
Okay.
As backdoor cold front kind of sweeps on in. Like this morning when I was driving into work, shades on, windows down, sunroof open.
What song was playing?
I forget.
Oh, okay. That
Do you
means it was something
believe?
embarrassing. Keep going. Keep going. We almost
No,
around
it
you.
wasn't that. But now we're in the upper 40s.
It is. It's chillier out there.
So
Naya was
it
just
really
saying that.
cooled
Chillier
down.
out there right now than you would have expected based on kind of what we've been experiencing.
Right. We kind of knew this was going to happen. We knew the warmest part of the day was going to be late morning into the early afternoon. But emphasis on morning for here in Norfolk. It cooled down really, really quickly around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. But if we look at our satellite and radar, their backdoor cold front, you'll notice it's pushing on in. So if you're north of it, you're cool. You have a northeast wind. If you're south of it, you still have a south wind. So here's a look at those winds right now. And you see winds coming in from the northeast for Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Williamsburg, Hampton, Exmoor. But if you're down in Franklin, Elizabeth City, Edenton, you guys have a southwest wind, which is a warm wind. So you guys are much warmer down there. But again, if you're closer to the coast, you're in Norfolk, Beach, Cape Charles, Exmoor, up into the northern neck, feeling pretty chilly. Here's a look at some.
Can I quickly before you? Can we go back to that really quickly? For a weather question from a lay person who know the ins and outs of this. So you've got these two winds kind of fighting each other, right? Is there any sort of phenomenon that happens where the two forces meet?
So sometimes you can get precipitation.
Oh.
We're not really seeing any out there right now. It's not really. We're not expecting to see that. But when you have two winds converging, it lifts air up. And when you have rise air, it creates clouds, creates precipitation. So we're seeing clouds out there right now, but we're not really seeing any precipitation. But converged air forces it to rise upwards.
And can we stay on that note brief moment?
Sure.
So if we look out at, let's do the Botanical Gardens camera, if we could, Naya, please. Thank you so much, in Virginia Beach. This is Virginia Beach, and it looks a little cloudy but clear overall. Right here in Virginia Beach. Then, if we switch over to our beach camera, it is literally, so this is Botanical Gardens in Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
It is completely clear. You have a very good line of sight. If we switch over to our beach camera down at the ocean, aforementioned boardwalk, can't see a thing.
Can't see a thing.
The
temperatures drop to the dew point pretty quickly at the Virginia Beach ocean front. It's right around like 42 degrees.
Okay.
So the air condensed quickly, so it created some intense fog.
Okay, and you're right, it happens so fast. And even if you look in town center, not like that, but over there where that dew point dropped, intense fog. Okay, I was curious about that before we even started the forecast.
But yeah, so there's some big temperature differences going outside right now. So if you're, up into the eastern shore, it's a chilly afternoon. Look at Wachapreet, you get 42 degrees. It's at 59, but Tano's at 68. So again, the further you are from the water, it's not too bad. Quinton's at 70 degrees, Tappahannock at 62. But if you go down to Phoebus Beach, upper 40s to low 50s, Newport News, downtown Newport News at 40 degrees. But look at Comet. You guys are 67, but Smith at 59, Rushmere at 56, 71 in Carly. And look at the south side. The ocean front's at 40 degrees. But Chesapeake Regional Airport's at 60.
Wow.
Hickory at 68. Great Dismal is close to 80 degrees. So again, if you be warmer, just drive to the south and west. Franklin's in the upper 70s, pushing 80 degrees. But again, temperatures will start to drop for some. If you're warm right now, you'll start to feel that cooler air creeping on in because that cold front's continuing to drop further to the south. So eventually, all of us will start to cool down. But
keep a sweatshirt in the car.
Keep a sweatshirt in the car. Look at Knott's Island right now, 51. But then Elizabeth City is pushing 80 degrees. It's 81 in Hertford, but 49 in Coralla. 78 in Murfreesboro. 80 in Buckland, 78 in Alligator, 83 in Greens Cross. So, yeah, some huge temperature differences going on. Here's a look at the visibility down to around 2 miles in Virginia Beach, 2 miles in Hampton, maybe even a little bit lower around Virginia Beach. So again, if you're around that area, you're heading to the ocean front, you want to give yourself some extra time on the roadways. But through the evening, it's going to stay pretty chilly, unfortunately. We'll be in the mid to low 50s inland, upper 4 to low 40s the further north you are. So Norfolk 48, around clock 45 in Williamsburg. So it'll be chilly. But winds will start to switch again out south and west. So we'll warm up overnight, actually, into Saturday morning. Could see some patchy fog out there, maybe a little bit of a misty-ish kind of start of the day. But we warm up quickly into the mid to upper 70s. It'll be a beautiful afternoon. So any outdoor plan Saturday will be looking really, really nice. By Saturday evening, I mean, kind of like summer vibes.
That's pretty fantastic.
Pushing 70 around 9 o'clock on a Saturday night.
That is great. This is exactly what we like to see.
You
This
don't
is
have-
what we've been waiting all year for.
Right. It's like you don't have to go home and change into pants and a long sleeve.
Okay, 64 in Virginia Beach, out there by the coast. Maybe
I would probably.
Yeah.
But say, you were out all day,
You just don't back. You'll be comfortable. You'll be okay.
you'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds
Sounds
At
like
least
that's
it's not
your
going to
plan.
be like 50.
Right. Okay. So we're back. We've got a beautiful Saturday, a ish Friday. Well, it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
And then Sunday it starts working its way back down a little bit.
Sunday's going to be warm again.
Warm. Man, this
This is
amazing.
Sunday morning. We're in the low 60s. It's cloudy. We could see a few showers in the afternoon, but we're back into the low 70s. So, you could still do some outdoor activities on Sunday, but you run into some showers. And then Sunday evening, we're still back into the upper 60s to right around 70s. So overall, not a terrible weekend.
This is great. Not a terrible weekend. This is a spectacular weekend.
Yeah,
Saturday
it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be really, really nice. And may even warm heading into next week as well. The 70s are sticking around. They do not want to let us go. They are obsessed with us. And
they should be.
And I love them.
Yes. Love that for
And
us.
I thank them for that.
I know. Stick around. Friday, every other day, we're looking good.
But next week, though, by the end of next week and this weekend, we will start to see temperatures dropping back to where we should be for this time of year. It's not looking like we're going to be seeing, middle of winter type temperatures, upper 50s to low 60s, where we'll likely be heading into the end of next week and next weekend, which, that's fine.
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
Let's not get what's the word I'm looking for? Let's not get overzealous here. Let's not
Right.
get greedy.
Right.
Right? We're getting some mid to high 70 weather in early March. We gotta go ahead and just not that for granted. We'll be okay with that.
But also this weekend, my favorite holiday, daylight saving.
Yeah.
I don't care that we lose an hour of sleep. I'll lose an hour of sleep to have an hour late set.
Worth it. Well worth it.
Well worth it.
Yeah.
Sunset today at 6:04. Sunset Sunday 7:06.
Take it. Oh man. We get a whole hour. Everyone's going to get to watch some sets. You get to drive, depending on your schedule, you get to drive home from work in the daylight. It just feels like you can do more stuff. Speaking of doing more stuff, did you go for a morning coffee walk?
I did.
Nice.
Yeah.
Talk to us. Give us some details. What'd
It
you
was
see?
really
What'd you hear?
nice.
Do you go phones or do you go natural sounds?
So, that's so funny because if I'm going for like a longer walk,
Yeah.
I'll take my headphones.
Of course.
But I was like, I think I'm just going to walk to the coffee shop and walk back, which doesn't take super long. So I literally looked at my headphones and I go, I don't think I need these. And I put them back down.
You have no idea how psychologically healthy that is. Being able to sit in a little bit of silence. Let me tell you, Hunter, I'm right with you because yesterday I forgot my headphones. And it was a beautiful day. I was forced to go fuck just with no music or podcast or anything. It was kind of an experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you sat in your thoughts.
I might have to do it a little more often. I did. My thoughts. I thought about you guys, how much I appreciate you as
What do
coworkers.
you think about more, me or Naya?
I would say I thought about you guys both equally because we're a team. I thought about us. Thank you. So we've got our sunsets coming in. Now, I do very briefly, Naya, tell me if I'm wrong, but we maybe have some audio issues. I do want to say to those of you who are watching, we hear that there is a little bit of an echo. If you're hearing that at home, we're working on that right now as soon as possible. We apologize It's not a vocal feature that Hunter has adopted and learned, a ventriloquy type of thing. It is a technical issue that we are working on getting fixed. We hope to have it fixed as soon as possible. So thank you for bearing with us. We appreciate it on a Friday. We haven't had any technical issues this week, so we were due for a little something. Okay, what else do you got for us?
Well,
He's been thrown.
This evening, though.
Okay.
To tomorrow morning, again, we could see some patchy fog developing. Temperatures staying pretty late this evening. If you do have any outdoor plans, I know it's a Friday night. You pants and long sleeve and a jacket, unfortunately.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it does get better. Things will be nicer heading into this upcoming weekend. Again,
Better than low 30s. Yeah.
Better than the low 30s.
Yes.
Still could see some patchy fog tomorrow morning. And if you look at the 7-day forecast, that 55 is like
It's an out.
it's in the middle.
Yeah.
Because right now, some of us are in the 70s and some are in the 40s.
Oh, that's right. So I get what you're saying. For today, there's so many variants that you guys couldn't possibly encapsulate the whole viewing area weather in one number.
Right.
I gotcha. Okay. So if you are out in Chesapeake and it feels closer to 71 or 72, don't be mad. Don't be mad at Hunter.
Right.
You know, because over in Virginia Beach, just in front, it's closer to 45, 46.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
I read you loud.
but back into the 70s this weekend, things are gonna be looking really nice.
Okay. All right. Oh, we're getting the sign from Naya. Oh, Naya's getting us on pause to break here because we are going to get the video issues fixed for you guys. At least that's the plan. But first, we want to say, Hunter, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. We'll see you at 4 o'clock on 13 News Now.
4 o'clock, I'll be there.
4 o'clock for us on 13 News Now. We're going to take a brief commercial break. We hope to come back free of echo. For now, let's hear from our sponsors. Okay, back here in Live Impact News, where we actually are you out live to Washington, D.C. right now, where the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is speaking at the podium. Let's listen in.
their ships. Their Navy has been deemed combat effective. 90% reduction in ballistic missile retaliatory strikes against the United States and our Gulf Arab and partners in the region. So, of course, we are achieving the military objectives of this operation, and that is going to continue because the United States military is the best and most lethal fighting force in the world. Sure, go ahead, Benny.
Can you confirm if the U.S. had full control over the airspace in Iran, like it's been reported these past days? Trump said within hours, within days. Can you confirm anything along those lines?
Yes, we're on our way to doing so.
Caroline, the president's faith in Russia to cut a deal with Ukraine been shaken by the knowledge that Russia is apparently supplying intelligence to Iran in this conflict?
I think the president would say that peace is still an objective with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war. You saw Special Envoy Witkoff put out a tweet yesterday announcing a new prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine. So it's something this administration still wants to see and something the president will continue to work on.
Has he expressed any frustration to Putin about this?
I'll let the president speak on that directly. Mary.
What does the president mean when he calls for unconditional surrender? Is he saying that the regime has to fully relinquish control?
What it means is that when he, as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, determines that Iran no longer poses a threat to the United States of America and the goals of Operation Epic Fury has been fully realized, then Iran will essentially be in a place of unconditional surrender. Whether they say it or not, frankly, they don't have a lot of people to say that for them because the United States and the State of Israel have completely wiped out more than 50 leaders of the former terrorist regime, including the Supreme Leader. Monica.
Thank you, Caroline. The president had a July 4th deadline, Big Beautiful Bill. Does he see a deadline for the Save America Act, as I know that's a big of his to get passed?
As soon as possible, I know the president would say. A huge priority for the president. It remains one. I know he has added some priorities to the Save America Act in recent days. No transition surgeries for minors. We are not going to tolerate the mutilation of young children in this country, and no men in women's sports. And the president putting all of these priorities together, it's to just how common sense they are. These are all common sense priorities of the president that are backed by the vast majority of Americans, and he wants Republicans to act on them as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Ken Paxton laid out some missions yesterday, saying that he would drop the race if Senate leadership on the Republican side agreed to, getting rid of the filibuster, for example. What are the president's thoughts on that?
I won't get ahead of the president on the Texas Senate race. I know it's of interest to everyone. I'm no longer his political spokesperson. I'm a government spokesperson, so I'll let him speak on that directly.
You elaborated on the president's decision to tap Mark Mullen as the next DHS secretary. Can you talk a little bit about the rationale for the choice, why Mullen was the best candidate in his eyes, and also your message to Democrats who continue to keep the DHS unfunded?
Yeah, well, Senator Mullen has been a strong friend of the president and a big supporter of the president's immigration policies. Not only that, he's exceptionally talented, qualified, and I know well respected by his peers on Capitol Hill from both of the aisle. So we look forward to his expeditious confirmation, and I know the House will be working with our counterparts in the Senate to make that happen as quickly as possible. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. The president has said he will be involved in Iran's future. He has also called the son of Supreme Leader Khamenei a lightweight, and he has also said that state strikes have taken out the potential candidates. So does the United States now have any candidates or candidates who may replace, who may lead Iran? Sure.
I know there's a number of people that our intelligence agencies, the United States government, are looking at, but I won't get any further on that. Sure.
Is the president satisfied with the pace of investigation into whether the U.S. military did hit that Iranian soul? Is the White House concerned that this was the United States?
And as I said at the briefing 2 days ago, I don't have any updates with respect to the investigation. I expect those to come from the Pentagon. Sure, Haley.
That the U.S. was raiding in the region of the school.
Again, I don't have any updates for investigation come from the Pentagon directly. Haley. Again, I'll let the president speak on that directly.
Do you have any comment,
Sure.
Caroline, do you have any comment on the MAGA influencer divide on the Iran war? It seems like everything on X is everybody's going at each other. Any message to both sides of the aisle?
I would just remind people X is not real life. This president lives in the real world. And with respect to MAGA, President Trump is the leader of MAGA. He's the creator of the MAGA movement. And there is nothing more America first than taking out terrorists who have maimed and killed our own servicemen and women, who chant death to America and who pose a threat to the homeland. And so President Trump is a leader of the peace through strength foreign policy doctrine. He attempted peace through diplomacy exhaustively and extensively with the rogue Iranian regime. And so they have been struck with the strength and the sheer might and will of the United States Armed Forces, and President Trump has proven he's a man of his word. If you go back and look, not just over the past year as president, but in his first term and in many years in his private life as well, when he has said that the Iranian regime can never obtain a nuclear bomb, well, now he's finally acting on it, and he has the courage to do what so many presidents in the past did not. We'll see you guys later.
That was good. Zach got the shots of everyone. I think so. Oh, wow, that's really cool. Yeah.
I've been gaggled.
I do that a shirt.
Put a thing in the chat. I will.
Jay, you want to feed this? Sorry.
And dismissals, rejection, yet he kept appealing to our better angels and urged us to keep on keeping on. Even as his body began to fail, his spirit and imagination never did. He talked about organizing a peace mission to Ukraine. He wanted to appeal directly to Putin. He wanted to organize ministers to help negotiate peace in Haiti. The Reverend's mind and will was strong even as his body failed him. He was very clear about the challenges we face today. He believed the progress made during what historians call the Second Reconstruction, the era that grew out of the Civil Rights Movement and expanded democracy for millions, was now facing renewed resistance from the highest levels of our government. The foolish denial of threats to democracy and to decency, corrosive inequality, catastrophic climate change, endless wars, a renewed arms race, global pandemics, and more. And he reminded us that in each of these crises, it is always the least of these who suffer first and suffer the most. And that conviction shaped his ministry. In his final months, he spent a lot of time with his grandchildren, private time. No moms and dads allowed. He loved it, and they loved it. And after he passed, I asked each of my children, Sky, Yusuf, Cassius, Atticus, and Matthias, what was their last conversation with their grandfather? I asked, what did he say to you? Each of them, separately and individually, thought for a moment and told me, Dad, Granddad told me he loved me. And those are the last words I remember him ever saying to me as well. Wherever he traveled, he made time for children, at schools, at churches, at hospitals, even in prisons. He believed that inside every child was a somebody waiting to emerge, and that with faith and support and hope, they can achieve excellence. He would say, I know because I was one of them. And today his legacy will not be carried forward by family alone. This type of work does not pass by blood, it passes by spirit. Thus it is in his name that we have committed ourselves that the Rainbow Coalition will continue. We have recommitted ourselves to its founding principles. reached out to engage new leaders across the country and restructured and revived its operations. And we will put the good Reverend, my father, to rest today, and will honor him by building upon his work and taking up the challenge. And so while he would be delighted to witness this gathering of friends and allies, and sorry to not be here to conduct it personally, he would be intent that we stay the course and carry on the struggle for justice. I thank you all for being a part, not just of his work over the years, but to the shared commitment of our future together. Keep hope alive.
Come on, let's celebrate our brother, Mr. Yusef Jackson. I want to apologize in advance to Governor Gavin Newsom, California, Governor Wes Moore, Maryland. Come on, clap your hands and let's celebrate them. So grateful to have you. I want to apologize in advance as I introduce the governor of the greatest state in these United States of America, Governor J.B. Pritzker.
You said it. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Justice in a too often unjust world. For Reverend Jesse Jackson, each day was a new opportunity to bring justice in a too often unjust world. His ambition, the North Star of his advocacy, was to shape a world where justice is not an anomaly but a constant, where fairness and equity and dignity are so ubiquitous in our lives, they simply flow amidst us like water. Reverend Jackson was at once a mighty roaring river, able to create movements and galvanize masses with his words and his passion, and a gentle brook, able to provide guidance and comfort to the beleaguered and the bereaved. He could lift up and connect with an audience of millions with the same intimacy and fervor that he could with an audience of one.
Okay, that was Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker speaking at Jesse Jackson's memorial service today. Now, we are back here in the studio. We are going to look to get back to that event, but we're back here in the studio following those technical difficulties. We believe and hope that we've gotten our audio fixed. We wanted to wrap up what we saw from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt before we took our break to get everything fixed and before we kind of reset here in the studio. Now, obviously, Caroline Leavitt has finished her press conference. You did hear a very specific question she was asked about unconditional surrender. And we're going to go ahead and pull up a Truth Social post from President Trump from earlier today, 8:50 a.m., March 6th. That is today. That is this Friday. That's the timestamp. And it's likely that this is what was being referred to in that question. Quote, "There will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. After that and the selection of a great and acceptable leader, we and many of our wonderful and very brave allies and partners will work tirelessly to bring Iran back from the brink of destruction." And so on and so forth. So there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. And then the mention of the selection of a great and acceptable leader. Both notable portions of that post on Truth Social. And then, of course, he finishes up with a few more statements here. Now, unconditional surrender, again, along with the selection of great and acceptable leaders, are key parts of this statement that obviously are being asked about and that will continue to be the focus of those who are trying to figure out where our conflict with Iran is headed, when this could possibly end, what the goals are of the United States. The selection of a great and acceptable leader. Acceptable to who? What is the definition of an acceptable leader? Who is selecting that great and acceptable leader? All questions that may come from this post on Truth Social. But that first sentence, of course, relatively clear. There will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender, all caps. So that is likely where that question came from. It is a very notable post that we wanted to make sure we included in our coverage of the conflict with Iran today. So let's go back to the studio here and let's head back out to Jesse Jackson's memorial service where Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker continues to speak. Let's take this event live right now and listen in after the 84-year-old civil rights icon passed away just a few weeks ago.
His mind remained sharp. He never failed to pull me aside at an event to ask about something in the news or offer a word of advice or encouragement. He was politically connected. He knew. He shared an affliction common to all those in this room. He loved the political game all the way to the end. And while we know that we shared him with the whole world, Reverend Jackson belonged to Chicago. And Chicago belonged to him. He was ours and we were his. I am somebody. That wasn't just a slogan, it was his credo. It was Jesse's blessing on each of us, on all of us. A pronouncement of pride and accomplishment, pride and determination. It was his reminder of the incredible power that each of us has to lift ourselves up. The gift of dignity in our personhood that God had bestowed upon us. The power that each of us wields that can change the world. I am somebody. To his beloved wife, Jackie. To his loving children, Santita and Jesse Jr., Jonathan, Yusuf, Ashley, Jacqueline, and the entire family. MK and I and our whole family grieve with you in your loss. While Reverend Jackson meant so much to the world, you were the world to him. We will forever be grateful for your sacrifice in sharing him with the rest of us. To honor his legacy, let today be a new beginning, not an ending. Let's follow in his footsteps and be trailblazers and not just pathfinders. Let's bring justice to a too often unjust world until it rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. May Jesse Jackson's memory be a blessing to us all.
Again, everybody, as we celebrate Reverend Jackson's life, let's again welcome President Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden. Let's celebrate them. Again, let's celebrate President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton. Can we celebrate again President Barack Obama? And can we show our love for Vice President Kamala Harris? While Reverend Jackson was a global citizen, Chicago was home base. And so please help me welcome the mayor of the greatest city in the world, Sweet Home Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson. Come on.
Thank you for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. It is truly my honor to be here today as mayor of the city of Chicago to celebrate a man who was my dear friend, a mentor, and a source of inspiration, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. Thank you to Mother Jackson, the entire Jackson family, for the grace and the courage that you all exude. And Mother Jackson, we don't mourn and grieve as the world because we are not ignorant to what has happened. And you will see him again. That's not a promise from a politician, but from the word. And he said, if it weren't true, I would not have told you so. Now, to the Jackson family, I'm not trying to start any trouble, but I looked at the program and I didn't see any West Side representation. I didn't see nobody from the Church of God in Christ on the program. So I know I represent the city of Chicago, but God bless you, Bishop Shears. I guess they wanted us to get out on time, so they. But on behalf of my wife and my entire family, I say thank you for the care that you have shown us. From one first family to another, we love you. By evidence in this audience, the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, and the world, the country, agrees. One quick story. Reverend Jackson may have been the most competitive individual that I've ever met. So a few years ago, we were wrapping up a meeting on the west side of Chicago at Reverend Johnny Miller's church. And Zeke, we started talking about football. And at the time, Lamar Jackson was on his way to becoming the MVP of the National Football League. And I looked at Reverend and I said, now there's a Jackson that's really making a name for himself. And you know, Reverend did not like that. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I played that position. And he said, you know, I was better than Lamar Jackson. Zeke, true story. He said, he might be taller, faster, and stronger, but I'm better than him. And I said, Reverend, well, that doesn't leave too many more categories to determine greatness. And I said, in all seriousness, what makes you better? He said, because of my instincts. See, in sports, you hear about how athletes have a good feel for the game. Something innate that can't be coached that allows them to read the field and make split-second decisions that ultimately position their team to win. Reverend will be remembered certainly as an incredible oratory champion, but to the people in Chicago, we knew him as a brilliant strategist, a master negotiator, an organizing savant. His instincts. See, he didn't shy away from the painful realities of racism and hatred, but he had a God-given ability to bring people in, to encourage them in, and to enlist them into the fight of our collective liberation. It was his instincts that understood that labor and faith were one and the same, as Dr. King prophesied. It was his instincts to stand up against school closures and the shuttering of mental health clinics. It was his instincts that led protests down Michigan Avenue when a boy's life was taken by a police officer and then government decided to cover it up. It was his instincts. It was his instincts to run in 84 and 88, but not in 92 to make way for somebody in the deep South and a brother on the South Side to become president of these United States. It was his instincts. See, I had the privilege to accompany Reverend to Selma one year, and while we were there, he recounted the days and weeks that were spent organizing to get folks to walk with them across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And he said, now that history has proven us to be right, he said that everybody and their mama was on that bridge. But he knew the struggle from going town to town, and he was calling people out of isolation and into community, understanding that the bridge is a symbol that burdens all of us. It's what connected us. It's what was waiting for us on the other side. He had a feel. His instincts understood that that bridge was a representation of the cross. See, it was the bull counters of the world and state-sanctioned violence that they unleashed on our people. It was a cross brought to bear by the most egregious alignment that can materialize in a fight against inequality. Reverend Jackson's instincts understood the words of James Baldwin, who said that ignorance and power allied is the most ferocious enemy of justice. But his instincts understood that if there's a cross to bear, we need a symbol of a promise. And that's when he formed the Rainbow Coalition that said that whosoever will, let them come. It would be necessary for the movement to build the future that he saw where America could finally live up to her ideals. And when I think of Selma and that storied march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I know that Reverend Jackson knew exactly how much wickedness and hatred waited for them on that bridge. Beaten, abused, intimidated, they marched anyway. They bore the cross because they understood that on the other side of the bridge, his instinct said there's a win. And see, in America, we find ourselves at a bridge, and we are confronted in this moment. And that bridge is now described as borders, where borders get to determine how human dignity is determined by which side of the border you live on. He understood the bridge. And so now we are in the midst of a choice to choose hope over despair, light over darkness, love over hate, because he knew there was too much to gain on the other side of the bridge. Bishop shared, I think I feel my help coming. Because on the other side of the bridge, Rodney, housing as a human right. On the other side of the bridge, health care for all. On the other side of the bridge, safe and affordable cities, accessible transportation, finally fully funding our public education system. It is time to cross the bridge, you all, to build an economy that works for all. Black, brown, white, Asian, young, old. It is time for the ultra-rich to pay their fair share in taxes on the other side of the bridge. Reverend, you cross your bridge. We know our assignment. We see you on the other side. God bless you.
Reverend Mayor Brandon Johnson, everybody. And the whole church said, amen. Thank you so much. Before we get ready to bring the next set of speakers, and we look forward to what you will share, straight ahead is a clock.
Okay, back here in the Live Impact News studio after hearing from the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, with a passionate speech there at Jesse Jackson's memorial. He also noted former Presidents Clinton, Biden, and Obama all in the audience at today's memorial. Now, they're getting ready to bring up another set of speakers. If at any point during this memorial one of the former presidents speaks or another notable figure takes to the podium, we will go back out live to that memorial service. A family of Jesse Jackson, if they take the podium, again, we will go back live out to that memorial in Chicago. For now, we are going to move on to some other headlines from this week. In fact, we're going to hear from Virginia Senator Mark Warner, who gave a Virginia media availability yesterday where he touches on a number of headlines from this week, including the conflict in Iran. So let's hear from Senator Warner. We'll come back into the Live Impact News studio after he does a question and answer with Virginia media.
Good morning, everyone. And obviously, a lot is going on here, so let me get right into it. We are now on day 6 on President Trump's war of choice against Iran. Let me say at the outset, obviously I'm going to shed no tears over the death of the Iranian leadership. The leadership and the regime has been awful to the 92 million Iranians, but also enormously anti-American, anti-Israeli. But it still begs the question of why now and why during this time frame. So far, we've seen from the administration 4 different answers on why this war of choice was started. First, it was supposed to be about the Iranian nuclear capabilities that the president bragged had been completely obliterated last June. Obviously, they weren't obliterated. Second, it was about the growing challenge of Iran's ballistic missiles. And yes, that is a growing concern, but there was no imminent threat to the United States, for that matter, even an imminent, immediate threat to Israel. Then there was the concern about the Iranian Navy, which I only heard in the last briefing. And then there's been the on and off about a regime change. The question I have, the president has asked for the Iranian people to take back their government, but if the Iranian people show up with 100,000 protesters in Tehran, Iran's capital, and the Iranian Republican Guard, the military, kill 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 of them, does America have obligation to go in and protect those protesters? We don't have an answer on that. I've also been particularly concerned about so many of our sailors who are in now the conflict zone, who are home ported out of Norfolk. I think about the Gerald Ford, our largest carrier that is now approaching month 9 of its deployment. Originally was going to go to the Mediterranean, then it was sent to Venezuela, now it's back to the Mediterranean. And I heard on Sunday when I was in Virginia Beach and Norfolk and Chesapeake from friends and family members of those sailors who are deeply concerned about when their loved ones are going to get back, how much danger there's in, and what is the purpose of this war. We know the administration has acknowledged that it is going to be weeks and maybe months more, and I still don't believe there is a clear purpose. It was one of the reasons why I voted yesterday for Tim Kaine's War Powers Resolution. If the president is choosing to take our nation to war, the president ought to come to the American public and the Congress and ask for a declaration of war and make the case. He has not done so. I'd also point out, and while our focus should appropriately be on our fellow Virginians who are in harm's way or the 6 service members who've been killed in the conflict, and with the expectation of more casualties to come. Again, the president and the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth's own words. We also need to look at the cost. We don't have any estimate of the amount of cost of this war. We do know that, for example, every Tomahawk missile that's fired costs about $2.4 million. That it has cost close to $1 billion to assemble the forces in the region. And again, this is a choice. This is an administration that chose not to fund health care for millions of Americans in terms of the tax credits. This is an administration that's chosen to cut Medicaid, although most of those cuts won't take place until after the elections. Administrations that's dramatically cut back on food assistance for needy families. This is an administration that's dramatically cut back on research and development. So the question of how large will this bill be and what other domestic programs will have to be cut to pay for these bills is unknown at this point. And again, I remind people, this was the president who was going to get us out of endless wars in the Middle East. And if there's one thing we should have learned from the last 30 years, it's a lot easier to get yourself into a war in the Middle East than it is to get yourself out of a war in the Middle East. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Catherine and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, the first question is from Mitchell with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Thanks a lot for joining us this morning. I have a 2-part question related to some of the things you just touched on related to Iran. Defense industry officials are going to meet with the president tomorrow, and amid these reports of possible munitions and interceptor shortages as the war keeps going, what concerns, if any, do you have about that possibility? And related to the cost, do you think Congress will be willing to come up with a military supplemental related to the overall war effort?
Well, we've seen a drawdown of our munitions, not just because of, for example, our strikes against the Houthis, but this president, I think, has had 7 military interventions, including Nigeria, including Venezuela, including Syria, Iraq. And so we have to increase our defense industrial base. But it is clear that while the administration is saying they've got enough immediate bombs itself, some of the other interceptors, should the Iranians, shoot more at us, those are low. If the president is going to ask for a supplemental, I'm sure we'll take a look at it. But again, this is all about choices. I wish the president would also come back with a supplemental saying, we need to actually return health care to the millions of Americans who've lost it. We will take a look at his request, but there needs to be clarity on what the goals are of this war and how long it's going to take. We do control the skies over Iran at this point, but I don't know how, with a bombing campaign only, you meet all of even the goals the president's outlined, like getting rid of all of Iran's military industrial base. I don't know if you can do that with a bombing-only effort, and I think the overwhelming majority of Americans do not want boots on the ground, and I'll point out the president has not ruled that out.
The next question is from Tom with Fox 5. Tom, are you there? Okay, our next question is from Audra with Sinclair Broadcast Group.
Thanks, Senator. I appreciate you staying consistently available, even as this is unfolding. We're closely tracking the impact on gas prices, up 27 cents from a week ago. First, as news reporting is suggesting this morning, from what you've seen, do you believe the administration's planning for this war to last at least through September? And then, obviously, the impact on drivers would be devastating if that happens. As the president says he wants to do, is it even feasible for the U.S. Navy to escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz? Thank you.
We've known that the narrowness of the Straits of Hormuz makes it very easy to block, or the Iranians could even sink some of their own vessels there to cut off those straits, which would, in many ways cripple the energy supplies, not just for America, but for countries around the region. We've already seen, as you said, gas prices go up 27 cents. As we get into the spring and summer season, that's going to really provide a major hit on Americans' pocketbooks. That, combined with the fact that the inflation numbers are coming in higher. This is a president that is not focused on affordability, no matter how many times the White House tries to send him out on this subject. He has no record of affordability. I pray that this war will not last till the fall. I've not heard any projection that far in advance. But if we don't have a clear set of goals, when do we declare victory? Is this going to be simply when the president gets tired of the war, or when gas prices get too high? I still continue to worry that we don't have the level of support from our allies that we normally would, and that has the potential to prolong the conflict as well. So I think Americans are going to see the price at the pump rise dramatically, and it'll get much worse if the Straits of Hormuz are closed. And I have not heard of any reasonable plan where you could have escorts of these tankers, particularly through that narrow stretch of sea. I'm open to somebody convincing me, but I've not seen anybody rationally propose that kind of a workable situation.
The next question is from Jada with ABC 13.
Hi, Senator Warner. I have a question pertaining to ICE.
So Governor Spanberger is telling ICE they need to obtain judicial warrants to detain illegal aliens, but we recently had a case here in Virginia where an illegal immigrant with an extensive and violent criminal history has been released back into the community several times due to this rule and has now stabbed and killed another woman. In cases like this, where is the line, and should Virginia cooperate with ICE more freely in order to protect the lives of Americans?
Well, listen, of course, if someone has a history of violent crime, they should be arrested and deported if they're here illegally. But I'll point out that over 80% of the individuals that have been picked up by ICE in Virginia as they try to hit their daily quotas have had no criminal history or record other than coming into our country. And many of them, even having come in undocumented, were going through a process that would bring about legal status. So they're trying to play by whether the amnesty rules or other rules who are put forward. I think ICE needs to be reformed. I would welcome, though, the chance to go ahead and fully fund TSA, fully fund the Coast Guard, fully fund the cybersecurity agency, all the other entities, and still negotiate about reforms with ICE. But I, for one, have always felt that someone who has got a long-term criminal record, they deserve to be deported. But the overwhelming majority don't fit that category at all.
The next question is from Ashley with Wavy.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for taking questions. I had a question going back to the War Powers resolution, and we know the Senate voted against it yesterday. The House votes on it today. We've heard from Republicans saying that presidents on both sides have taken advantage of Article 2 powers of the War Powers Act of 1973 and do similar things where, whether it was Obama and his actions in Libya or Biden and the attacks in Yemen. Explain how you believe this is a different scenario from either of those.
Obama, Biden, Trump in his first term have used Article 2 powers. They have almost always been the United States responding to a provocative action by a different country. In this case, this is a war of choice. There was no imminent threat from Iran against America. There was no attack by Iran against America. The president built up these forces over a series of months. And when you have a war of choice, the president can make that case, but the president is obligated to come to the Congress and come to the American people and make the case and get approval. I think there is an enormous distinction, and I've heard Republicans and Democrats both use when you are responding to another action, the president is given a little more leeway. When you plan for months a war and your adversary does not strike America or even pose an imminent threat, then I absolutely believe the president has to seek approval of Congress.
The next question is from Ben with WRIC.
Hello, Senator. Thanks for answering our questions. ABC was reporting that tens of thousands are still abroad, and even Senator Kaine was saying that Virginians have contacted his office trying to get back home. Have any Virginians contacted your office who are stranded at airports across the world? How many have gotten in touch with your office? Where are they coming from? Have you been able to give them any answers or any comfort that they'll be coming back to the States anytime soon? Yeah. Have any Senate colleagues talked with you, or do you know about how many Americans in general are still abroad?
The number that's still abroad in that region are in the thousands. Many of them, for example, dual citizens in Israel. But in terms of travelers, my office has been overwhelmed with calls coming in. I think it's in the hundreds now, many who are stuck in Dubai or stuck in Doha, who are not even going through the region, but they were simply, those are transit flights that were going from America and they might be headed to Asia or elsewhere around the world, and they land on a transit flight and are stuck there. This is one of the things that, again, baffles me. We knew this was coming. The president, working with Israel, chose the time to launch this. Why wasn't there a better plan put in place to get Americans out? And the remarkable thing is, other nations, European nations, it appears to have done a better job of getting their nationals out of the region. And we're told to call a phone number at the State Department that oftentimes is busy and doesn't have much information. Secretary Rubio did indicate in a briefing, I believe yesterday, that they were trying to fly more planes into the region to get folks out. But again, when you choose the time and place to start a war, you would think that someone would have thought about, well, we got hundreds of thousands of Americans in the Middle East. We ought to plan in advance to either get them out before the war starts or have plenty of planes available to get them out once the conflict is started. Unfortunately, as we've seen so many times with this administration, they're not great on the details.
The next question is from Angela with Hampton Roads Messenger.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for taking my question. I actually have two questions that I hope you can answer. My first one is, do you know if there's anything special that can be done to support the families of the USS Gerald Ford? For instance, some of the spouses have had to act as single parents for more than 250 days and counting. Is there anything that can be done to further support these families? And my second question is there a downside to eliminating the religious leader of Iran?
Great questions. On the first, I talked to a Navy mom on Sunday with 4 kids under 10 who were trying to explain to her kids why their dad wasn't coming home at the end of February, who was on the Ford. There are, in Hampton Roads, a number of military support groups. It's a good question about for the Ford specifically, where we should direct assistance to. I'll get that and post it on my website, but there are a whole host of support organizations in Hampton Roads. And I worry about those sailors. I mean, they'll do their duty. And this mom told me she's a reservist. She'll do her duty. But we're now, as you said, over 250 days. I hear reports that the toilets aren't working that well, the stress that's being put on these sailors. And I heard the stress as well when I was in Hampton Roads on Sunday, in Norfolk, in Virginia Beach, in Chesapeake. Every meeting I was at least half the people at the meeting had loved ones or knew folks who were deployed at this point. So that has a stress on the community, has a stress on the family, and obviously has a stress on the sailors who've been deployed. In terms of killing the religious leader, the supreme leader, this is a guy who had American blood on his hands. I will shed no tears for his demise. But I would point out that as bad as he was, he had put some limits on weaponizing Iran's nuclear program. We don't know who's coming next. The one thing that we did know is that, because we didn't have great visibility into the Iranian resistance, that there was a high probability that we might end up with someone that was even worse than the Ayatollah. So we will see as times go on. This is, again, why, if you're going to launch a war of choice, you got to make the case. And since we don't have, since the president has offended so many of our allies, many of those allies who might have better visibility into the Iranian resistance and a better idea on what's coming next, and I'm not sure we got all that information.
The next question is from Jim with the Virginia Mercury.
Senator, it's Jim Spencer. Thanks so much for taking my question. So Donald Trump has a pattern of ignoring the Constitution to do whatever he wants. He did it with the Iranian war, he did it with due process with ICE, and he's done it now with the tariffs that the Supreme Court knocked down. Why can't Congress hold him accountable for the pattern of behavior? What he does is he does things whatever he wants, and then you can't get him to undo them. Some of it has been done already, and in other cases, he won't make things right, even if he's held culpable by the Supreme Court.
Well, Jim, the simple answer to your question is there are too many Republicans who are still too afraid of Donald Trump to do their, what I believe is constitutional duty. And it's amazing to me the number of my Republican friends who keep saying, oh, Mark, you're right, but then they don't vote that way. And when I say they aren't doing their constitutional duty, even if they agree with the president, they ought to exercise Article I powers and ask the president, for example, in the case of the war, to come and make the case. They can vote for the war if they want to, but have him at least make the case. Or in the case of tariffs, they've all quietly complained. But we were only able, on the basis of Tim Kaine's good work, pass one resolution around the Canadian tariffs. We should have passed more. My fear is, and Jim, I appreciate you've followed this for a long time, when Congress continues to cede power to a chief executive who ignores the law, ignores norms, has a level of just frankly crudeness and threatening to his supporters and foes alike, it really diminishes America, diminishes Americans' trust in their government and institutions, and frankly diminishes our allies' willingness to help us around the world. Some of the numbers on how America is viewed now are at record lows, and a lot of that is due to Trump's America-only policy, which oftentimes is turned into America alone, which does not make America safer. I can promise you that.
Senator, our final question is from Tim with CBS 19.
Hi, Senator. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Obviously, you've been very vocal about what's been going on in Iran and how you believe there needs to be more checks and balances on the president. Obviously, Virginians will be voting on redistricting this coming April. Do you think the redistricting will help with that?
Listen, I think the only reason we're having this referendum is because the president started mid-decade redistricting in Texas and also in North Carolina for purely political reasons. But unlike Texas and North Carolina, where the politicians made all the decisions, in Virginia, the voters are going to decide whether we want to take a temporary part-time or temporary pause redistrict, going back to nonpartisan at the end, at 2030 at the when the next census. I think it makes sense to try to balance out some of the other mid-decade redistricting done by the president. But at the end of the day, Virginians are going to be able to make that choice, not politicians.
Senator, those were all the questions we had today.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay, so that was Senator Mark Warner there doing a Virginia press media availability, and it looks like Nia Campbell's going to focus me up here a little bit. That was so nice. Very nice job, Nia. Very smooth. Okay, we're back here in the Live Impact News studio. We're keeping an eye on our live board, and we're going to give a brief update that kind of relates back in some way, at least, to what Senator Warner said. You heard Senator Warner mention how he has gotten hundreds, if not more, calls into his office in regards to people who are trying to get safely home from the Middle East, American citizens who are trying to get safely home from the Middle East. Well, this is happening in Canada as well, based on some of what we've been reading here from the Associated Press. Canada's Foreign Minister, Anita Anand says its efforts include a chartered flight set to take 180 Canadians from Dubai to Istanbul on Saturday, a block of 50 seats each booked on Air Arabia flights from Dubai to Istanbul, 51 seats for Canadians on an Emirates flight leaving Dubai for Toronto on Saturday, 200 seats on 4 separate flights from Beirut to Istanbul in the coming days, and roughly 325 seats on commercial flights secured for Canadians by diplomatic staff in Beirut. Anand said Canadians are also making their own arrangements. She said, quote, "I want to reiterate that any ground transportation carries risk," end quote. Anand also said the United States and Israel do not have a blank check in their bombing campaign in Iran and remain bound by international law. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney initially expressed support for Washington's decision, but later said the airstrikes likely violate international law and said his support comes with regret. So the impacts of this conflict touching down not just in the Middle East, not just here in the United States, but in Canada as well, where they are scrambling to try to get Canadian citizens safely out of the Middle East, just as you heard Senator Warner talk about how in America we are scrambling to try and get people, American citizens, safely out of the Middle East. Okay, let's move on now. We just heard from Virginia Senator Mark Warner. After a brief commercial break, we are going to hear from Virginia Congressman, Hampton Roads specific Congressman, Rob Whitman, as he was a part of the Armed Services Committee panel yesterday. So first, we're going to take a brief commercial break. Then we will hear from one of our congressional representatives from right here in Hampton Roads, Rob Whitman, after this break. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back here on Live Impact News on this Friday. You know, we started off the show a little bumpy. We were having some technical difficulties. We were scrambling a bit. I feel like we've smoothed out here. We've reached a good place, which only means that because I said that, something is going to happen. But for now, we're in a good place. We're going to listen to Rob Whitman as the House Armed Services Committee had hearings earlier this week. And Rob Whitman, one of the speakers at that hearing. Let's listen in right now to the congressional representative from right here in Hampton Roads.
Taiwan. Congressman, I'm not exactly sure about exactly the status, so let me commit to get back to you with the detailed information.
Well, you told Senator Wicker 48 hours ago that you would do the same, that you would get back to him. So you're telling us that in 48 hours, you
still got within the 48-hour window, sir.
On.
So we'll make sure we're within that window or barely over it, and I'll ask your forgiveness if that's the case.
It's concerning to me that within 48 hours, when you promised Senator Wicker that you'd get that information, that it's not forthcoming.
Take that responsibility to engage with you seriously, sir.
I want to get your perspective, too, on our efforts to work with partners and how we enable our partners. The president's asked our allies to do more. To their credit in NATO, they've all anteed up and said that they're going to do their 5%, some of them at different paces. But by 2035, looks like everybody's going to be in line with that. We ask Europe to take the lead in what we're doing to counter Russia. And our message should, I think, be crystal clear. If we step up and make investments in the defense in cooperation with our NATO allies, and we need to be selling Europe our best weapons to make sure that they're in line with what the threat is on the Russian side, and I believe the President's America First arms transfer executive order sends that clear signal. But if our American allies can't buy U.S. weapons, I worry they're going to be in a really, really bad spot because there's no other place to go, and we certainly don't want them going to other folks out there. Tell me this, what's the message to our allies like the Baltic states or Poland that are meeting or exceeding the 5% target? They're all in, but are being told U.S. weapons that they purchased are being delayed or not prioritized. So they're all in, they have the money, they've paid for it, and now they're being told, by the way, you're not going to get the weapons. Somehow the priority list has been changed and somebody else is higher on the priority list, and yet we see an even greater threat by Russia and what they're doing to build their defense industrial base, which creates an even greater threat, and yet we're not doing the things that we're lecturing the Europeans about doing and not providing them weapons. Give us a perspective on how we're going to close
Sure.
that gap.
Well, actually, Congressman, the way you laid it out, I think is pretty similar to how we see it. I mean, I think we're in excellent. 2025 was about reframing. 2026, we're getting down to business. The Europeans are moving. I can say that from personal experience, not least in Brussels and Munich, as well as Asian allies like South Korea. And I think we're optimistic about Japan, Australia, and New Zealand as well. We are ahead of this problem. We share your sense of urgency coming down from the president. I think we've got three main things we're focusing on. One is the president's historic proposal for a $1.5 trillion defense budget. That is a massive signal of the seriousness with which he and we all take the situation, conscious of the resource issues that Mr. Smith mentioned, but that's a signal of how serious it is. Second, money is a critical predicate, but it's insufficient. We need to have better performance from defense industry, and that's why the president is convening defense industry leaders tomorrow. You have from the president, the secretary, the deputy secretary, Undersecretary Duffy was here yesterday. Absolute commitment to getting better performance, and I think you're seeing a lot of progress because we all need to know. We want to be able to get our services where there are unacceptable timeline delays, but also green, our allies. And this is not a situation where there's picking and choosing and try to poke at people. We need everybody to be able to get what they need faster. And this, sir, is where I would turn it around to you and to the Congress, is where we all need to lean in together, also with our allies. This is where the conversation is. If I may say, some of the conversation in the last few minutes has been a little bit backward-looking. Where we are and where our allies' conversation is, NATO 3.0, let's get down to business. For instance, we're talking very closely with the Germans about how they're about to make a very significant investments in defense. How do we scale that together to get the best outcome for both of us? Also recognizing that while we need American industry to be eligible in European and other markets, there's also going to be growth in the European and allied defense space, and that's actually to all of our benefit. That's where we're heading. I'm confident that under President Trump's leadership, we will be able to get through this transition, but we did need to have the clarity and continue to need to have that clarity. But if you look at Secretary General Rutte, he's singing from the same sheet of music as we all are.
Very good. Thank you. I'll reiterate, too, that the chairman's focus on this year's NDA is growing the industrial base to make sure we can do those
Absolutely,
things. We have to do that at the speed of relevance.
Completely support that as well, sir.
Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colby, thank you very much for visiting my office for a long discussion last year. I appreciate that engagement. My reading of the NDS is that it clearly ranks threats around the world, putting the homeland first, deterring China second, and everything else a distant third. Is that accurate?
I think the homeland is obviously put first in the same way as it was in 2018. I think the first island chain is kind of the significant weight of effort, the military focus, as I said in my opening statement.
So the strategy also focuses quite carefully on the risk of simultaneity.
Yes,
meaning two simultaneous conflicts, either pre-coordinated or because an adversary takes advantage of us being tied down somewhere else. If that is a significant concern and China is the greatest threat, doesn't beginning a war in Iran not really help with deterring China?
I think the strategy is not saying that we're not going to do operations, and this happened under administrations of both parties. It actually specifically goes into that. It's saying we need to be prepared for this. Obviously, the things I mentioned, but also the allies and partners stepping up. And we do see that actually in the Middle East right now. We see Israel, the Gulf partners,
So one of the
some of our
things
European
that we
allies.
discussed in my office was concerns about magazine depth, which you've heard both from this committee and the China committee. Are you concerned about that today in the Indo-Pacific?
I think I think we have anticipated this reality. We feel good about where we are. Nobody should,
just to be clear, you anticipated a war with Iran.
No, we anticipated the need for dramatic action on. That's exactly what the strategy says under the president's leadership. Is we know we have very significant magazine depth across the force. That is also going to be able to support presidents of either party, et cetera, in the future, being able to use the military. But we need to get better performance, and that's why we're all leaning in on it.
You're not concerned about the number of missiles that we are using in Iran today?
I'm confident in the situation.
Okay, that is.
Okay, that is the extent, as far as we know, of Rob Whitman's comments during that Armed Forces Committee hearing. So we are or Armed Services Committee hearing. So we are going to move forward with another live event taking place right now. It is, in fact, an evidentiary hearing for former University of Michigan head coach Sharon Moore. You may remember the controversy that engulfed that university and their head football coach towards the end of last year's football season. I'm going to credit the Detroit Free Press here for a very well-worded summary that I'm going to read word for word. Moore was arrested November 10th and charged with third-degree felony home invasion, misdemeanor stalking, and misdemeanor breaking and entering after he allegedly barged into the apartment of his executive assistant, a woman with whom he had had a roughly 2-year affair. Again, that's coming from the Detroit Free Press. That summary, we're going to go live out to Coach Moore, former Michigan Coach Moore's evidentiary hearing right now.
Michigan is now back in session. The Honorable Judge takes session. You may be seated. Court does call the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Sharon Moore.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Katie Rosworski for the people. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Ellen Michaels on behalf of Sharon Moore, who's present in court. State your name.
Sharon Moore. Thank you. All right, thank you. You may be seated. All right. So date and time set for Frank's hearing, but things have changed. And even before you go on, I just want to express the court's appreciation for the hard work of counsel going through. I know it may have been a delay for the people that were waiting to see something, but your efforts were greatly appreciated. Ms. Rosworski.
Your Honor, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to address the court. First, allow me to apologize to the court and counsel. I was needed unexpectedly elsewhere in another county on a special prosecutor case this morning that went perhaps a little bit longer than expected, and then as life unfolds, I was rear-ended in a gas station parking lot. Everybody is fine, but I really appreciate everyone's patience, and it was not intentional. Thank you. Judge, I appreciate the opportunity to address the court about what has transpired and where we have arrived. This case, as is true with many cases, Your Honor, is alive and sort of moving and breathing. Investigation has been ongoing. An exchange of information has also been ongoing. As a result of all of that, where we have arrived, based on what we now know, is that we feel the most appropriate charges to address the defendant's behavior on December 10th of 2025 are two additional counts, counts 4 and 5. We would be seeking to add a count of what we call malicious use of a telecommunications device in the context of a domestic relationship, and then an additional count of trespass. Those are, as Your Honor is aware, misdemeanor matters. Your Honor, we have arrived at that as indicated based on a thorough review of the additional evolved evidence and investigation, as well as after consultation with, pursuant to our obligations largely through her representatives in this matter. Your Honor, one comment I would like to make specifically about the additional count of malicious use of a telecommunications device in the context of a domestic relationship. As this court is aware, but I would like to be clear for the record because of, I know, docket and calendaring purposes. Your Honor, we did not at the time of issuing initial charges in this matter, nor do we believe now, after additional evidence has been presented to us, do not believe that there is sufficient evidence to prove a count of domestic violence in this matter, not historically and not what happened on December 10th. So we are obligated, as the court is well aware, legally and ethically and morally to not charge that which we do not think we can prove. What we do believe the evidence supports is criminal misbehavior in the context of an intimate partner relationship, and that is why that tag-on is on the malicious use charge. Your Honor, it is my understanding that pursuant to adding those counts, that there will be a plea as a result of that, but I leave that to counsel.
All right. Did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you so much. I'd like the record to be clear that the negotiated disposition involved the dismissal of the 3 charges that had been charged. That was not mentioned in the recitation by the prosecutor's office.
That is absolutely correct. The end result of where we land by adding on the counts is that my best understanding is that the defendant will enter a plea to those additional counts, and in exchange for that, we will absolutely dismiss the originally charged plea.
And that would be an entering of a no contest plea to count 4 and count 5 with the dismissal of count 1, 2, and 3.
All right. Very good. The court does have before it a plea agreement form that indicates that the defendant will be pleading no contest to the charge of malicious use of a telecommunications device with domestic relationship tag. That is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 6 months incarceration. He will also be pleading no contest to the charge of trespass, which is a 30-day misdemeanor. Upon his successful no contest plea to those charges, counts 1, 2, and 3 will be dismissed. That is the court's full understanding of the agreement. There is, however, one other thing that should be mentioned, and that is with reference to sentencing. The court is going to be given full authority, if the court deems it necessary after a review, to sentence under a deferred program. That is the court's understanding.
That is also correct. That is correct.
All right, very good. Mr. Moore and counsel, if you could approach the podium, please. Okay, gotcha. And if I may have him sworn. Mr. Moore, it is this court's understanding that you are going to be pleading no contest to 2 misdemeanor charges. The first charge is the added count 4 of malicious use of a telecommunications device involving a domestic relationship. That's a misdemeanor punishable by up to 6 months incarceration and a $1,000 fine plus court costs. Do you understand that, sir? Yes, sir. And also the added count 5 of trespass. That is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 30 days in jail and or a fine not to exceed $250. You understand that, sir? Do you understand what a no contest plea is? All right, 2 things about a no contest plea I have to make sure that you understand. First thing is that it first of all means that you're not further desirous or wanting to contest these 2 charges. You understand that, sir? Second thing you need to understand is that for purposes of sentencing, the court is going to treat you the same as though you had pled guilty. You understand that? All right. Basis for the no contest plea, counsel? Potential civil liability. All right, very good. Got it. Some more to the charge of, let's do it this way. I can find my form. To the charge of malicious use of a telecommunications device, how do you plead? To the charge of trespass, how do you plead? Now you understand that by pleading no contest, you'll not have a trial of any kind. I don't think he has executed any device and rights form, has he? I think he did, actually, but I don't have it. at arraignment. Do you recall that, sir? Pardon? The advice of rights form?
I have one that I printed up just so we can continue. I did go over the advice of rights form with my client yesterday. So him signing it now is acknowledging that he did review it yesterday.
All right. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll let you sign that. Did you have any questions regarding any of the rights that are contained on that form?
No, sir.
All right. You understand that by pleading no contest, you're waiving or giving up the rights that are contained on that form.
Yes, sir.
Particularly the rights that are contained under paragraph 5. You'll see a copy on the podium, which are your trial rights.
Okay, we come out of that courtroom with former Michigan head coach Sharon Moore because former President Barack Obama has just taken the podium at Jesse Jackson's memorial service. We're going to go live out to Chicago right now.
The book of Isaiah. Where are you at? Now, see, I believe in the Constitution. The book of Isaiah God is looking for a messenger to guide a hardened and resistant people. And the Lord asks, whom shall I send? And who will go with us? To which Isaiah replies, here I am, Lord. Send me. To Mother Jackson and the Jackson family, to President and Mrs. Biden, President and Secretary Clinton, Vice President Harris, Pastor Dates, my old friend, though he looking good, Reverend Meeks, Reverend Jenkins. It is an honor to join you today to celebrate the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, a man who, when the poor and the dispossessed needed a champion, and a country needed healing, stepped forward again and again and again and said, send me. Reverend Jackson's immense gifts were apparent at an early age, even if his circumstances conspired to try to hold him back. Born out of wedlock to a teenage mom, growing up under the oppressive cloud of segregation, confined to schools, sports facilities, movie theaters that were separate and unequal. It was a world where on Thanksgiving he'd have to wait for his mother to come home on the bus carrying leftovers from the dinner she had to cook for somebody else. A world designed to tell a child that he or she could only go so far. That to think otherwise would be foolish or dangerous. And that wisdom required you to accept your lot in life. And young Jesse refused to accept that verdict. He was a born leader, an athlete, a talker, knew how to talk, star quarterback, student body president. He could have succeeded within the confines that were determined for him and had a successful life. But like so many of his generation, so many extraordinary civil rights leaders in the late 50s and 60s, that Joshua generation, he instinctively understood that individual success meant nothing unless everybody was free. So he became inspired by the bus boycotts in Montgomery. He led 7 black students into the whites-only library, sitting down and getting arrested for reading. Think about that. The library closed, but then it reopened. And when it did, it was open to everyone. Send me, Jesse said, even as a young man, and the world got a little bit better. By the time Reverend Jackson graduated from college, he had attended Chicago Theological Seminary. He knew the nature of his calling, and he became, as everybody knows, the youngest member of SCLC, assigned to lead Operation Breadbasket here in Chicago, right around the time that Isaiah Thomas is talking about. And it was during this period, and especially after Dr. King's death, when the optimism of the early movement had begun to fade and leadership had begun to fracture, and when the country seemed to have grown bored, gotten weary of the idea of justice and equality, and moved on to other concerns, that Reverend Jackson rose above despair and kept that righteous flame alive. Through Operation Push, he led boycotts and challenged corporate policies around hiring and contracting, recognizing that civil rights without economic justice was an empty promise. He backed unions in their organizing efforts and activists in fair wage campaigns, understanding that if the have-nots and the have-little bits ever learned to make common cause across racial lines instead of fighting each other over breadcrumbs, everybody would benefit. He helped register millions of voters. He fought against biases in the criminal justice system. He drew attention to local abuses of power and called folks at the national level to account. And by the early 80s, he was delivering that message of change and hope across the globe, freeing hostages from captivity, fighting to end apartheid in South Africa. And then, in 1984, as the powers that be in Washington were rolling back hard-won progress, slashing the social safety net, when more and more folks were getting left behind, and greed was being trumpeted as a virtue. See, we've been there before. He stepped forward once again and said, "Send me." He ran for the presidency of the United States of America. I had just graduated from college during that first campaign. And I was living in New York at the time. I was working to pay off my student loans, eating a lot of tuna fish and Campbell soup. And if I went to a diner, I'd grab some extra crackers, put them in my pocket. And I was inspired by the civil rights movement. And I had in my mind to work for social justice. But even though I was full of good intentions, I was uncertain of how to serve and fighting off self-doubt. And I remember how, at the time, plenty of people, including, plenty of black folks, were dismissing Jesse's chances, suggesting, oh, he just wants attention, he can only get black votes. But then I remember one night sitting in my janky apartment, and I got an old black and white TV with the rabbit ears, and I'm kind of jiggering around, and it's about this big. I know young people can't imagine, but the TV was about this big. And I'm watching the Democratic primary debate between him and Walter Mondale and Gary Hart. And I remember how, when that debate was over, I turned off that TV and I thought the same thing that I know a lot of people thought that night, even if they didn't want to admit it. That in his ideas, in his platform, in his analysis, in his intelligence, in his insight, Jesse hadn't just held his own. He had owned that stage. He wasn't an intruder. He wasn't a pretender. He belonged on that stage. And the message he sent to a 22-year-old child of a single mother with a funny name, an outsider, was that maybe there wasn't any place, any room where we didn't belong. And that message of fairness and dignity, of justice and hope, that's what the Rainbow Coalition was all about. In 1984, and then again in 1988, Jesse didn't just speak to black folks, he spoke to white folks and Latinos and Asian Americans and the first Americans. He spoke to family farmers and environmentalists. He spoke to gay rights activists when nobody was talking to gay rights activists and blue-collar workers. And he gave them the same message, that they mattered, that their voices and their votes counted. He invited them to believe. He invited us to believe in our own power to change America for the better. By the delegate count, Jesse's two candidacies ultimately came up short. But he paved the road for so many others to follow. Doug Wilder became the first elected black governor. Carol Moseley Braun went to the U.S. Senate. Because of Jesse, the Democratic Party changed its rules, ending the winner-take-all distribution of delegates during presidential primaries, which meant underdogs and outsiders like Bill Clinton or Bernie Sanders could stay competitive and build momentum instead of getting knocked out early. And it was because of that path that he had laid because of his courage, his audacity, that 2 decades later, a young black senator from Chicago's South Side would even be taken seriously as a candidate for the presidential nomination. I still credit that first run of justice and Harold Washington's campaign for drawing me to Chicago. And I didn't know anybody when I first arrived. I was working as a community organizer, as it so happens, in neighborhoods right around here. Roseland, Woodlawn, Alt Gill, West Pullman. And I'm meeting these young preachers like Meeks and some crazy priest named Flager. And I guess Jenkins was running around, but he's kind of young. He came a little bit later, so I'm going to churches and I'm listening to all these amazing preachers and it was hard work, and half the time I didn't know what I was doing, and progress was slow, and I definitely didn't know how I was going to survive these Chicago winters, because I grew up in Hawaii. But I do remember heading to the Push headquarters some Saturday mornings to listen and learn from Reverend Jackson. And y'all remember how on some mornings, if there was a major issue going on, the room would be packed to the rafters. And sometimes some celebrity just wanders in. And then some mornings it was kind of low-key. Either way, though, the announcements would be made, and Reverend Barrow would say a prayer, and just he'd sit there, and then finally he'd gather himself up and stand, and he'd start kind of slow, you know, and sometimes he'd talk kind of low, so you couldn't quite catch what he was saying, so everybody lean in. And over time, was that same boundless energy that would emerge, and that same passion and that same insight. And he'd offer you a master class in economics on a Saturday morning. And he'd give you a seminar in American history and American politics. And he'd make complicated things plain. And he'd tell stories that would make you laugh 1 minute and cry the next. And whether you were a bus driver or a teacher or a business leader or a young organizer, you came away from those meetings with a better understanding of how the world worked, how power worked. And more importantly, he made you believe that if we came together, we could make the world work better. Now, we've been talking about Jesse telling us we are somebody. I am somebody. And he wasn't just talking to young black boys like Isaiah, though he loved them fiercely. He wasn't just talking to young black girls to help them believe, though he believed in them. He was talking about everyone who was left out, everyone who was forgotten, everyone who was unseen, everyone who was unheard. And in that sense, he was expressing the very essence of what our democracy should be. The ideals at the very heart of the American experiment. The belief that regardless of what we look like or how we worship, regardless of where our ancestors come from or how much money we got, we're all part of the American family. We're all endowed with the same inalienable rights to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We're all obligated to answer the call and step forward and take responsibility for making wrongs right and for caring for our neighbors and bringing the reality of America a step closer to its glorious ideals. And answering that call isn't always easy. And Reverend Jackson and his family knew that better than most. To do what he did, he would endure all kinds of hatred and setbacks and betrayals and doubters and death threats. He would sacrifice, as Jim Reynolds pointed out, the leisure and comfort of what was available to him as a far more financially secure life. And those sacrifices were not his alone. They were shared by his wife and his children. And they bore that burden with grace and strength. I got to know the Reverend and his family over the years, and as I watched his children follow his example of service, I came to appreciate the conviction that drove him, that he had passed on, the faith that guided him and that he had passed on. And it was a faith that didn't waver, a flame that burned bright, even as his body began to fail. The last time he and I had a chance to visit in person, he was already ailing. It was getting difficult for him to stand, difficult for him to speak. We were in Hyde Park, in a hotel room. I embraced him and figured we'd just have a low-key visit. Maybe he'd need some rest. And he starts coming up with this project and this initiative and issues I needed to look into. And here's some commentary that he would suggest, and some phrasing that he thought might work, and maybe we might co-write an article. And listening to him, I couldn't help smiling. Because it took me back. And I started reminiscing with him about those Saturday mornings at Push and the breakfast that he'd host, you know, away from the full meeting. And I didn't get a chance to go to that until I was a state senator, and probably Meeks invited me. So I was like, you know, I was tagging along with Meeks. And he'd pull out a piece of paper. You know, he'd scribbled some stuff, and he'd start passing out assignments and pulling together working groups and asking for updates on the latest campaign. And I'll admit, let's face it, those sessions could run a little long and did not always follow Robert's Rules of Order. But when Jesse called your name and acknowledged you in that room, especially if you were young, especially if you were just coming up, especially if you weren't sure you could pull off what you thought you might be able to do, especially when you needed help. When he did that, you stood up a little straighter. You knew you'd been seen by this giant. He'd laid hands on you and let you know you had a contribution to make. And so that day, I told him how much that meant to me and how much it meant to so many lives that he impacted.
Okay, unfortunately, we do not get to finish former President Barack Obama's comments at Jesse Jackson's memorial. We simply have run out of time. We had a lot of plans today, but there were a lot of live events that we wanted to stay with, that we wanted to check in on, and so we instead must come to the conclusion of our stream on this Friday, the conclusion of our streams for this week, and we will end it with our Furcast, Pause for Charity, coming up right here on 13 News Now. And so as we say goodbye for the week for myself and Nia Campbell, we've appreciated everybody for tuning in to Live Impact News. There is a whole lot more to cover next week. You can be sure of that. We hope to see you on Monday. But for now, have a great weekend, everybody.